I would like to welcome you to our October webinar for the petrochemical industries. You know, as a kid growing up, I had to drive from Dallas up to Oklahoma City to go visit my grandparents, and the only thing I can remember out of a refinery was these lit places on the side of the road with all sorts of towers and lights and things going out. And you're like going, your dad says, they make gas there for the car. Oh, okay. Since I've been working in the petrochemical industry, we get all sorts of plastic stock. We get, you know, acids and bases made by them. So it's a lot more than just gasoline that comes out of these places. And I've been fortunate to visit all sorts of chemical refineries in my time. And some are new, some are old. We see switchgear dating back to the 1950s to stuff that's made today. We're going to have a handful of items and products that we can show you today. And so don't be afraid if you don't see something. Remember, we make over 800 products. So you can always look at our product finder, or you can call us at 1-877-472-3389, or send us your pictures at info@cbsarcsafe.com. So the first thing we're going to start with today is our RSA 9B for the GE Limit Amp series of medium voltage motor starters. Now, this is for all the CR7160s up to the 193, 194 series of motor starters that have either a black or a blue handle with a latch that you push into interlock. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention right now is this. We have the 9B here, we have a 9C. So if you have Kirk keys on a motor starter, the 9C works in a similar way. And we also have the 9E, which can push in, which has an actuator for pushing in the interlock to do this, okay? So depending upon what you need, we have about 4 or 5 solutions for this type of motor starter. So don't be afraid to ask us or send us your pictures for what you may have. Now, the RSA 9B works with the RS01, M18, and let me just go ahead and get this over here to start with. This uses our 4-pin Amphenol connectors, and it goes right up here, drops in, just like that. We screw it on. We turn on the RS01, and I'm just going to prop it up here so you can watch. Currently, the switch is in the open position, so now we're just going to go close. We'll hold it down, and for trip, this, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the tray over. I'm going to disconnect the RSO real quick, and I'm going to take the RSA off and let you take a look at what it looks like on the other side. So this RSA has a finger nut right here that is what actually pushes down the latch. The RSA 9E uses an actuator to do this. Okay, the RSA 9C has this built into it also. So, depending upon what you have, Kirk keys or not, or if you have limited space or something else, we've seen a couple different versions of this. There is actually one older version of the GE Limit Amp, which goes back to 1957. We've seen twice, and that's a different series of actuators. So, just be aware you can have those weird old things out there at times. These use 2 of our mag switch magnets to hold it into place, and then it comes off here on the left side. Okay, this is what it looks on the back side. For this series of motor starter, we do have to have the low voltage door open to be able to install and operate this. If you have the 9C, I think that you might be able to leave it closed. The next thing we're going to look at is for the Cutler Hammer series of low voltage motor control centers. Now, this is what we would call a size 1 through 4 bucket handle style. There is a larger size 5, okay? This one only does the smaller size bucket handles. We have the RSK version, which this is, and I'll show you the RSA 78 version series afterwards. The RSA 78A would handle what we call the size 5 or the main bucket, okay? Because it's got a much larger handle, it stands out on the face, and you've got an 800 to 1200 amp breaker back behind it. For this one, we use to have an M18. This is wireless, so we can operate this well outside of the arc flash hazard boundary. we'll push our wake button here. Then we have to hold down our on button here. And we'll hold down our off button to turn it off, and our on button to turn it on. Every once in a while, what I'll see is I'll have somebody that doesn't make sure that on this one, what's important is that this alignment tab right here is right up against the plastic side of the actuator, or rather the switch. Because if you let that sag at all, it won't make the full travel in one direction or the other. So if you see something like this, you know, make sure that you get it up there and that it's seated properly for the operation. It's just one of the things I'll tell you. Make sure that you do that, and it's going to operate properly, okay? It's very easy to determine if somebody doesn't have one of these lined up properly. Now for the ArcSafe 78, okay, this is what it looks like. We're going to, let me get this up here where it's supposed to be, okay. I'm going to go in right there. I'm going to put the magnet on, and then I hook up my ArcSafe 1. Both motor starter actuators, whether you're using the RSK or the RSA, are made to operate. So just to explain something, sometimes you can have a double set of handles on an MCC bucket. And either this one or the other one, the RSK, will both be able to accommodate that. Sometimes if you've got a lockout tagout on the left handle and you're trying to use the RSK, you may have to remove the lockout tagout for you to be able to use the RSK, because it can interfere with the mounting process and how it would actually set up. So just be advised of that. So just, all right, so we're in the closed position now, so we're going to go trip. We're going to go close. And that's the operation of the RSA 78. And remember, this is size 1 through 4. The size 5 is a bigger actuator, so be aware of that. You need an RSA 78A to do the size 5 bucket.
Can you mention the single purpose versus multi-purpose?
Okay. Now, one of the things to talk about, and the difference is the RSOs and the RSAs. The RSO is more cross-platform or cross-switchgear system. So when we first got asked to do all these, the products, you know, if you go back to October, September 2008 when we started, we had an RS1, we had an RS2, we had a push button and a breaker control switch thing. And then Finley started getting phone calls, I need something for this, I need something for that. And so we came up with the line for the RSOs, RSAs, where I could have a single operator, an RSO, like this, do all on and off functionality right there. Okay, and then somebody says, well, I got to have charge, close, and trip, and we'll see this in just a second here when we get over to the DS breaker on the other side here. And so we had to come up with an RSO3. The RSK line is just single use. It's not going to be able to be moved from a Westinghouse 2100 series bucket to a GE 8000 series bucket. Okay. It's only made to operate with this geometry, okay? And I can't just use my controller and that platform to just stick it on something else. Everything that we do has to be able to simulate or operate like what a man does, and so geometry drives your design. Geometry and forces are what's driving your design. So that's one of the things to understand.
So if you have a plant with all of one type versus a plant with several types of gear, there might be different choices.
So yeah, Brian asked the question, if you have a plant with one type of switchgear, well, gee whiz, that makes life easy because you're just going to need one set of actuators in that lineup. Where I've been in several plants where one of the things you'll see is, like, I won't say the companies, but like they may have 96 substations with switchgear that was made in 1960, switchgear made in 1970, switchgear made in 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010. And so we go back to GE 7700, GE 8000, GE E9000. We've got Allen Bradley in another substation and all sorts of other stuff. So each one of those is going to have a particular need, okay? And so we have things that can go for just the Allen Bradley, whether you want the single application, and ABL1, ABL3 series type of thing, or whether you want our RSA 71 series, okay? And sometimes you may run into a door configuration, and this is important, where bolts will interfere with the mounting because you've bought something that was made by an OEM afterwards that put an Allen Bradley contactor in the door and slapped their thing on the face. And so you'll need the RSA instead of the ABL3, okay? So pictures matter to us because if we have to make a slight adjustment or something to the design to accommodate what you have, that picture saves us time and effort and saves you time and effort, so we can make sure we're quoting you the proper product for what you actually have for switchgear in your facility. So the next thing we're going to look at is the Square D HVL switch. Okay, now there's a power assembly switch and a load interrupter switch that look similar to this but are slightly different, and then you also have an inverted bottom feed sucker that you can run into. We've got solutions for all of them, but we need to see which ones you have. So we actually have one refinery down in Texas City that has 2 different versions of this based upon the actual switches that they have in the facility, because they've actually got some switches where instead of this looking this way, it's mounted upside down. And it sort of surprised us the first time we saw that about 7 years ago, because we're like going, what? There's no library that you could just literally go look at to know everything that everybody's made. Even though you've got the internet out there today, and you can go do a Google search for a lot of different things, we still find stuff today that we have to go make stuff for, and there's no internet specification that you've got available that you can go download on something that was made back in 1960 or 1950, and somebody needs an actuator for it. So that's just one of the things to understand. All right, now this one, the switch is going to come down. We're going to open it. And we close it. One of the things we do with our new employees is we actually have them come out here and operate a few of these switches just so they can gain an appreciation for what you, the operators, have to do in the field. Because, you know, they're like going, you got to pull this thing down. You take a smaller person, they feel like they're hanging on that thing just to be able to get it opened or closed. So let me take this off and you'll be able to see the backside. One of the interesting things about this switch, and the RSA 147 series is made to cover this, is if I were to take this off, you're going to see places for Kirk keys here, the fact that this switch mechanism can actually be right here instead of here. And so we've worked to accommodate the design to handle all the majority of variations with this one that you're going to see when this happens. So the first thing I've got to do before I take it off is actually pull this pin off and take this off so that I can take that off. And we substitute our arm for the factory arm here for being able to do this, to make sure this has just got a Delrin insert in it so that it'll slide on there nice and easy. I'm going to start with the bottom magnets first and then undo the top magnets afterwards at the end. So that's what it looks like right there. And it takes a stout motor to be able to do this just because of how many foot-pounds it actually requires. Yeah, and we actually have, this one's got, I think, micro switches on it to be able to stop so it knows the range of travel that it's supposed to do. Now, I don't have one of these here today to show you, but understand the RS1 that we're going to go look at next is a universal remote racking system, and currently we've evaluated over 300 different types of rotary breakers globally to be able to rack with the RS1. Now, if you only have one type of breaker like this DS, we have another system that I don't have one here today, which is a breaker specific system, and it's a lot lighter weight and more portable, and you don't have to have as much room or setup space. So if you're in something like a NEMA 3R enclosure that's outside, an RS3 is going to be the way to go versus having an RS1. If you've got concrete floors, big substations, a couple different types of breakers, the RS1 is actually the more affordable system to be able to use to go do that, okay? Now, Brian, you've got the second camera. If you could cut over to that. This is a DS breaker. The DS breaker was designed in 1967 and went into production and marketing in 1969. It was made originally by Westinghouse. And I'm pointing right now to the position indicator. And one of the funny things I'll tell you is that position indicator is based upon the guy who installed it in the breaker the day they put this thing together or rebuilt it. So I've seen it where we were racking one that they just gotten back from getting serviced at a plant in Louisiana, and the guy stepped out of the substation and we had it sitting up on top of the crate, and I go, what if? So I just took the hand tool, I racked the breaker to where it was up in the connected position, and I made a mark on here to show where that was. And when we racked it back out and then they came back in the substation, we threw it in the cubicle, we hooked up the RS1 to rack it in. They say, it's not racked in all the way, because they were looking at the position of this tab and the word connect on here. I said, it's racked in all the way. How do you know? I said, you see that black mark? Yeah, that's where I made the mark to know where it was. And they opened the next cubicle and they're like, it is in all the way. So unlike the newer breakers like a Magnum DS where you got a red, yellow, and green indicator at the bottom, this one's not quite as accurate. It's like just based upon the guy who put this little aluminum tab in here and where it got bent the day he installed it. So just to make word of that. Now the RS1, we've already got it set up. We could use either the wireless remote or the pendant to operate this. Currently the breaker's in the connected position. We've got our settings set on it for pendant operation right now. And I'm just gonna, this is a machine which has got low speed jog. And one of the things I'll mention about the jog, if you're using the RS3 system, the DSR1, it automatically does this. And one of the things that I'm going to note right now is we also learn from our customers. So I was doing this the first year, and we went to one of our big customers in St. Louis, and they said, every time we rack this breaker in, we go back a half to a quarter of a turn from the full connected position. And we said, I asked the guy, why do you do that? And he says, because the racking mechanism and the operating mechanism are tied in together, and you can usually go a full turn to a turn and a quarter back, and the breaker is going to stay connected, the door is going to close for where the racking motor is, and the breaker is going to operate normally. And besides that, the next time you want to go rack it out, you're not fighting the big guy who's left this thing in all tightened up, and it actually does damage to the breaker if you do stuff like that. And we go, oh. So we learned that from a customer in St. Louis, and we work to share that with you. So if you were using the RS3, the DSR1 system, you hold it in, it'll go all the way in, and then you just continue holding it, and then it backs it out a quarter of a turn, and once it does that is when you stop the operation on that machine. On this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the remove button. The remove button is going to be going away. Okay. And it's just going to come out all by itself here. I push the E-stop button and I release it, and then it resets itself, and now we can go in. And what I'm going to show you is with this one, this is the low speed jog version of the RS1, and after we get it in, I'll jog it out just a little bit with the jog buttons so that we can have it come out just a quarter of a turn and take that tension out of the racking mechanism. Now, let it finish booting here, okay? And there, right there, I just, with that little jog, was able to move the breaker back just a little bit. And you'll see that when I move the RS1 back, that when it's done, the breaker will still have the little mechanism door closed, which is what we want. Okay. Let me just look at something here. What am I looking at? Let's see. Let me get to the other side here for a second. There we go. But you see that the door still closes. And what, if I can do this by hand, I don't know if I can do it. I'm going to try just to show you what I'm really talking about here. So if I come back like a turn and a quarter there, it's still closed. If I come back just a little bit more, the door's not going to close. So if the door closes properly, it means the breaker's in the connected position as far as it can tell, and it's going to be able to operate normally just like this. Okay, so that's why we jog it back, but we don't leave it all bound tight, because this is actually tied into this. Okay, you would actually see if I did this that I could have a lot less force actually used for closing and opening the breaker when it's backed off just a little bit than when it's bound on tight. Now, the RSA 12A actually has a sort of funny history to it, because you know, the vast majority of breakers that we run into with the DS are the manually operated ones. And a manually operated breaker, I'm going to move the RS1 out of the way here real quick, has a long arm on it versus a short arm. A short arm DS breaker is an electrically operated one, and an arm stops right about here. The manually operated one has the longer arm, and it takes 1 stroke, while the electrically operated one takes 9 strokes. Okay, and I went to a facility one day down in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. They had a critical operation DS electrically operated breaker, and the guy says, "You got to make me a device that can charge my manual breakers and charge my electrical breakers." And I said, "But that's got a charging motor." And he says, "That charging motor burns up, the poles wear out. I still got to be able to operate this breaker. And I got a 40-foot arc flash hazard boundary. You got to make me a machine." So with a little bit of ingenuity, our engineering shop came up with the RSA 12A. And this is made, if you look closely at it, I'm going to show it on this picture over here, Brian. I'll show it on this one. It says manual and electrical. And so I can just move this, and it'll change the position switches internal into the RSA for being able to actually do either the electrically operated breakers or the manually operated breakers. Okay, now where's the hole? There's a little. Okay. I'm looking for. There we go. Now on the face of the breaker, there's a small hole, and I'm just working to make sure I've got that in there. There we go. Okay. So we're operating manually, so we've got this in the upper position here. We've got the solenoids lined up properly right here. The RSA will say on it for manual operation, cycle 1, T1 7.5, T2 7.5. So now I'm going to take my RSO, I'll turn it on. It says 7.5, 7.5, 1. Can you see that, Brian? Okay. Now, if you haven't seen this before, this is labeled charge close, close, and trip. And if you ask why it's charge close, old IT K-line breakers, you pull that handle down at the bottom of the stroke, the breaker closes. Okay. An old GE AK1, AK2, AK2A, AK5, you move that handle up, it comes back down, it closes right at the bottom of the stroke. So we had to, this is the button that operates the motor. This is the buttons that operate the solenoids. So some breakers will charge and close on one operation, so that's the reason it's labeled charge close. And all we do now is we push the button one time. And It should go up. All right, I may have to increase it just a little bit because it did not charge the spring. Let me. Let's see. There we go. So sometimes you can have a little bit of wear in a breaker. This can be an indication of it. Our circuit breakers are used more than any circuit breakers in the field. This poor little thing has been rebuilt about 5 times now. Yeah, and we've got 3 of them. So I will tell you, I carried a Magnum DS breaker, and for the year I carried that thing and operated it for 11 months, it was 5 strokes on the handle, and then the last month I was carrying it, it went to 7, it went to 11, and I had to go get the charging mechanism replaced because we'd operated that breaker so many times. Okay, so at this point, we're going to hit the close button and the trip button, and that's the operation of the ArcSafe 12A. So even though you don't see all the breakers like Master Packs, GEAKs, K-lines, RLs, LAs, we have solutions for all of those. And so I've been in a lot of plants down along the Mississippi River and along the Texas Gulf Coast in the Houston area. And a lot of the reason we have over 800 products today is because of going to those places and developing solutions for those people. And just to let you know, we literally develop 1 new product every week. Again, you can call us at 1-877-472-3389 or send your pictures to info@cbsarcsafe.com. I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions now, so I'll step off to the side and let Kyle tell me if he's got any questions. And I'd like to thank everybody again once more for tuning in. And again, 1-877-472-3389 or info@cbsarcsafe.com. Send us your pictures, ask the questions. Remember, domestically in the United States, we do free site evaluations and demonstrations. So we can help you if you don't know what you have exactly. We'll help you figure it out. Thank you and have a great day.